Okay, so welcome. Hello, Claire.
Sorry.
Welcome to the My Moon Power Musings. And today we're talking to beautiful Claire Baker.
Hmm.
And this is on the dark moon that we're releasing this episode as well. And so Claire has an amazing menstrual cycle school, and you teach so many women how to connect with their menstrual cycle and you're really deeply into the empowerment of the menstrual cycle, and you've written an amazing book. It's called Period, isn't it?
It's called 50 Things You Need to Know About Periods, but periods is the big word on it. So
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Beautiful. I am very lucky that I have that book on my bookshelf as well. And so Claire, like, how did you get started in this work? Like, what was your entry point into it all?
I was studying nutrition and health coaching as a hobby, just as a side interest alongside my career I was working as a buyer for a creative arts company and working in visual merchandising. So my background was in creative industry, but I have always been really interested in health and well-being, and food as medicine. And from quite a young age, we would really backtrack. I had quite a significant experience with holistic medicine at around 16 or 17, where I was quite unwell and was just, my mind and my eyes were open to the power of natural therapies. And so that had just become a very foundational part of the way that I lived. But I also went through my early 20s where I was partying and living my best life as a uni student with, lots of booze, late nights and all of those things. And then as I started to study nutrition and began practicing yoga and just taking more care of myself, sort of returning to the values that I had held when I was a bit younger, I started to wonder why I was taking hormonal contraception. I'd begun taking that in my early, sort of mid-teen years, and I'd been on the pill for about a decade at that point. And it started to feel incongruent with the way that I was living. Paying more attention to the things that I was putting into my body and the kinds of environments that I was putting myself in, and just thinking more clearly about who I was and what I wanted from my life. And so I decided to come off the pill. So this was all kind of happening at the same time, studying, coming off the pill. And I lost my period for a full year. So I stopped taking control. And then my periods didn't come back for 12 months.
Oh my God.
So I had a full year of amenorrhea, and that was scary because I didn't expect that. I thought, come off this and my natural cycle would just return, and that didn't happen. So that frightened me and led to a huge journey into what fertility even is and what it meant. And at that point in my life, I wasn't interested in becoming pregnant, so it wasn't necessarily from that perspective, but I was just curious about why my body wasn't functioning in the way that I thought that it might. So I learned a lot about fertility awareness methods and ovulation and the menstrual cycle, which then began to feed into the work that I was already doing with clients. I was working with women predominantly on nutrition, self-care, wellness, well-being. And I just started to wonder why in my studies I had not been taught at all about the differences between the male body and the female body. And everything that I had been taught about nutrition and lifestyle was quite homogenous and across the board. And yet to notice once my cycle did come back, that actually I felt very different from week to week, and that impacted the decisions that I made around my nutrition, my fitness, my sex life, the way I created and related to people. And so very organically and slowly started to just weave its way into my sessions with my clients. I would ask people whereabouts they were in their cycle. I would do them cycle charting methods that I had been learning, and it was very much sort of behind the scenes for a number of years. So what I mean by that is like front of house, my business was health coaching.
Yeah.
Women, but behind the scenes there was just a lot of conversation happening around menstrual cycles and how that influence a session. You know, I'd see a client, say, for one session, and then I would see them 2 weeks later and they would be in a completely different moment in their menstrual cycle. The conversation would be really different, and the way that we approached their action steps or intentions for the next couple of weeks would depend on what was happening for them in their cycle. So that's the way it all really began for me. Definitely through my own challenges with my cycle, which, you know, as I was coming off the pill, I had excruciating period pain once my cycle did return. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome and had a whole host of premenstrual issues. You know, it took some time for my cycle to rebalance itself, but I'm grateful because those challenges really did lead to deep and vast curiosity, and just like when I zone in on a topic and want to learn about it, I'm just like, I'm all in. So it led to where I am.
Oh my God. And so then how did you balance your cycle? Like what were the steps that you took?
The first one was acupuncture and TCM, traditional Chinese medicine approach. That was my first point of call, which was so deeply foundational and transformative for me, because I really believe that those ancient modalities, you know, Ayurveda is another one, they understand the female body in a way that I just don't see Western medicine having that comprehension yet. Maybe it will in time. But there is just this understanding of how the female body works and what the female body needs, and this emphasis on yin and restoration and filling those inner reserves and creating well-being rather than just putting a band-aid over an issue. So that's really where it began for me, which then of course led to understanding the importance of sleep and you know, mindful of stimulants. And so a lot of it has actually been about doing less, really, you know, nourishing my body so that it had the reserves to be able to ovulate again, to bleed and get, you know, get my hormones humming. But it's it's not like there's no destination, is what I've discovered. I think at the very beginning I thought, brilliant, I'm going to get to this point where my hormones are sorted. And actually what I've noticed, particularly now as I move into my mid-30s, is they're changing all the time, you know. Now I'm noticing new changes in my cycle. So what maybe worked 10 years ago is different now, and I imagine 10 years time it'll be different again. It's just a constant conversation. So dynamic, the female life cycle, and listening to your body throughout that whole, you know, like I always say this to my clients, you know, what worked 12 months ago might not work now, and that's okay. You know, that can be tricky to lean into, because again, like the health industry would like us to believe that there's like one way that just is going to work for everyone all of the time, and that's easy to market that idea and sell it, but it's just not true.
Yeah, totally. And I think like there's so much confusion around hormones as well, and like who to even go to for your hormones, and like how to even get your hormones checked. You know what I mean? There's just such like a hormone minefield, I feel like. It's like really, it's like not something that we've been taught as we've been growing up. And so even like the things that I find when, you know, I was like doing courses or listening to things, and it'd be like, right, so if you have a progesterone imbalance or an estrogen one, and I was like, well, what do you even mean? Like, how would I know if I even had that? Because I don't actually know what the word means in relationship to me. You know what I mean? Like that whole bit of education seemed to be just disappear.
Yeah, and I get a bit wary of social media hormone and nutrition advice, because it all becomes a bit prescriptive, and that like self-diagnosis culture where we, you know, somebody says if you have X symptom then you've got estrogen dominance or you've got an imbalance of progesterone, and that might be true, but it also might not be. And so it also might be yeah, there could be something else that's going on. And so yeah, I am it's great that there's so much more information out there now. People are more knowledgeable,
Yeah.
and knowledge is power, but it is confusing and it is contrary,
Mm.
and there's
Mhm.
what works for me may not work for you, and
Yeah.
that's the nuance that's missed a bit in the hormone
Yeah.
nutrition conversation that happens on Instagram.
Yeah. And then you started your cycle coaching school. Is that what
Mhm.
it's called? Sorry, for cycle coach,
Yeah, cycle coach school.
cycle coach school.
Mhm.
And then so you've been training other women in this work. So
Mhm.
obviously you've worked with so many women, and what have you noticed, like what has been the thing that keeps drawing you back into this work, where you're like, I must share it, this is so powerful, and that it has got you to the point where you're like, not only must I work with women to support them, but I've got to teach other women so more of this can get out there in the world, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I always held this belief that I got bored of things quite quickly. My career, in the
Mm,
first half of my 20s was I was darting all over the place, doing all sorts of different things. And as a multi-passionate person, I have always just jumped from thing to thing. So it's quite
mm,
astonishing to me that I have been doing this for 10 years. And yeah, it's like, oh wow, this must really be meaningful, or some sort of
mm,
purpose or calling. It surprises me even still. So I do think about this, and I just I think I've moved beyond the stage of getting really angry and outraged. I think at the very beginning I was very angry. I was upset that I hadn't been taught this information earlier, and I was really driven by a fire to share it with as many people as possible, because I just, yeah, I was just so upset and
mm,
sad that I didn't know about the realities of my body when I was younger.
mm,
I was like 25, 26, that was when I first began to understand how my body even worked. I think it's changed now. It doesn't feel like it's so much a fire of
mm,
angry passion anymore. It just feels like home to me to talk
yeah.
about this work and to share it. It feels very natural and organic and
Mhm.
easy. And I've found a bit more like solid footing in it. That's the kind of
Yeah.
more grounded in it now.
Mm.
It's less like angry fire and more like, do you know what? This is my thing. And I feel
Mm.
really comfortable sharing it with other people and confident talking about it. But it's a different energy. And I notice with a lot of the young coaches that come through the school that they have that beautiful, angry,
Yeah.
ambitious fire. And I fully celebrate that and love
Mm.
educating and training other people to be able to take that fire out into the world, because that energy is really important. And I also recognize the phase that I'm in now, which does feel more earthy,
Mm.
solid. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. Wow. It
Mhm.
almost feels like your mother phase, doesn't it? It's like you've got the chicks under your wing, like
Yeah,
teaching them and
definitely.
like holding the space for them so they can go out into the world and
Yes.
keep sharing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you feel like that, after having worked in the field for such a long time, like a kind of sense of ease almost
Mm. I
in?
think for me, it's like my greatest joy, and this happened 2 times yesterday, is sharing this knowledge with people that have no idea at all.
Mhm.
And it's like I went into a magazine office that I used to work in yesterday to share my moon power oils with them, and it was just so beautiful, because I could see these two young women that were in front of me, and it was like I knew that this information was literally about to change their lives. And they
Mm.
sort of came in, like wanting to know, but a bit kind of, and then the more I shared, the more like I could just see them both be like and like that to me just fills me with like the biggest joy, because it's like you just kind of have given a little pearl of inspiration that is going to change a woman's trajectory, because it totally changed mine. Like the second I learned about this work was when I had the idea to create the My Moon Power oils, because I just felt it was so important and not enough women knew about it. So it's like when I guess what I'm saying is that when I share the light, like from my candle to light their candle, then I know they're going to go and light other candles, and it's just like, it just, yeah, that is just, I just love it. That lights me up, you know.
I think it's really healthy to spend time with people, who, like you say, don't have an understanding, have never been exposed to the ideas and this wisdom. And this is, again, something I share often with the people that I train, is to remember to step outside of the menstrual bubble that often we live in as practitioners and facilitators working in this industry. Is our Instagram feeds are probably full of like womb workers and light workers and people who are working fertility and menstrual cycle awareness, and we can begin to form a belief that these messages are mainstream and that they are widespread, and that can then, the imposter syndrome can then come in, or the inner critic begins to wonder, well, who am I to be sharing this, or comparing ourselves to others. And so it's so important to do, like, you know, as you just described, to step into other realms beyond this bubble and to out into the real world, and to remember that these ideas are not mainstream and this wisdom is not held amongst the masses. And we have so much to share, so much gold to bring to people. And every single one of those moments where you take your candle and you light another candle for somebody else is so precious. And I'm honestly humbled every time. I'm so grateful every time I get to have that experience of sharing it. It never gets old, does it? That
no, it doesn't. It's like, it gives me energy too. As well, I'm sharing it, but it lights me up as well as the other person. It feels really, really powerful. And so today you're going to talk us through cycle mapping, the 101s of cycle mapping, and then share a cycle mapping ritual for us as well. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
This is something really dear to my heart, because again, as more and more information is shared, which is so wonderful, and I fully support that, and you know, knowledge is power. And when we begin our journeys with menstrual cycle awareness, of course, we want to read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, take all the courses, and understand whether it be the hormonal fluctuations that are happening on a biological or physiological level, or we want to understand to track, you know, our fertile signs, or we want to know, you know, what's happening physically or mentally or creatively, spiritually throughout the cycle, how we can connect to the moon and our blood rituals and all of those things. I really do believe that the most important thing is actually listening to our own body and understanding our own cycle, because while it might be true, for example, that some women feel very energized around ovulation, or they notice an increase in libido or a desire to be sociable, that's an archetype, you know, that's an archetypal, quite generalized idea. And actually for a lot of women, that's not their experience at ovulation. And there can be all kinds of reasons why somebody might feel more tired around that time, or actually feel quite vulnerable and exposed, or have some grief, you know, if there's journey around fertility happening at that time. Same goes for all of the phases. There can be menstrual joys, is something I like to call them, in each and every phase. And there can also be menstrual shadows in each and every phase. And our experience of our cycle is so unique. And so while it's helpful to have, you know, an archetypal blueprint, you know, shared with us, if like this is how you might experience each of these phases, we really need to learn to listen to our own body and tune in with what our cyclic experience is. And then, as I said earlier, to also appreciate that it will change. And so how you may feel on cycle day 16 6 months ago might be very different to how you feel now. And approaching each day with that like beginner's mind and curiosity about what your cycle might be like this spin around, and it might not be the same as it was before. So of course there are patterns that can emerge over time, and that can be really helpful, understanding how to approach our life, how to plan our calendar, but also it's not static. And cycles fluctuate and change. So cycle mapping as a process is dropping into what's actually going on for us and paying attention to those menstrual joys, those menstrual shadows in each phase. And then of course the self-care that we can lean into, the things that we know work for us at different times, and creating a map, a document, a resource that we have that we can refer to when we're in a particular phase of our menstrual cycle, and drop into that. So yeah, the menstrual joys, shadows, and self-care is one framework I use, menstrual mapping. And then the second is checking in with the 4 bodies. So checking in each day, physical body, what are we noticing about our energy levels or our hunger, appetite, sleep, things like that. Mental body, what are we noticing about our thoughts, what's happening, in our mind. Health is a really important one under that umbrella. The third is the emotional body, what's happening in our heart, what are we feeling. And then the fourth is spiritual, and that is probably the most subjective, and that to me means how connected do I feel to myself today, or to a higher power or energy, or even to nature. For others it might be they might have more of a religious practice, and that can be connected to that. It could be relationships. There's so many different ways that we connect spiritually, and so I encourage people to define what that means for them. So the 4 bodies, and then the menstrual joys, shadows, and and that might sound like a lot, but it doesn't take literally like a couple of words, one word in each of those headings. And over time we begin to develop this very rich resource that tells us so much about ourselves, who we are, and how we can really feel most alive and feel our best. And beautiful practice over time can accumulate something very, very valuable.
Wow, I love this. Because I have always just sort of thought about it as like, how am I feeling today? Just a few words of what I'm feeling. And this, I love what you've done, is that you've really broken it down into so many different areas, because we're so multifaceted as women as well. Like there's so much that we're holding and like in different areas. Like when I actually do all of my tune-ins, I'm like, wow, this is happening, this is happening, that is happening, that is happening. And there's so much contradiction within us within one day as well. Do you do your cycle mapping at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day?
That's a good question. If I was speaking specifically in terms of fertility, then I would say at the end of the day, always. For example, we might notice at the beginning of the day we feel dry, but at the end of the day there's a wetness, and so it's important to do fertility charting always at the end of the day. But I think when it comes to menstrual cycle awareness, which is less about fertility, more about how we're feeling, then actually it can be, I think, at any time of the day. And I think it's interesting to do it at different times of the day as well. Because also we have, like, it's just cycles within cycles, right? Because also we have the 24-hour cycle of the day in our circadian rhythm. And so how we feel at 8 a.m. might be very different to how we feel at 8 p.m. So it is a bit more of an art than an exact science, in the sense that fertility awareness, is more of a science, is rather fertile or not. Whereas menstrual cycle awareness, there is a bit, there's more nuance and room for like fluctuation during the day.
Beautiful. And then when you're doing the fertility charting, and you said at the end of the day you're checking what your discharge was, is that what you mean by that, the dry and the wet?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, if I was teaching somebody fertility awareness methods, and we're focusing on their cervical mucus for the day, so it would be really important. It's important to do that towards the end of the day, because you might be dry in the morning and there might not be fertile mucus, whereas it might develop as the day progresses. And so the end of the day for fertility charting, that's important. And just add another point to that, though, if you are doing temperature charting, then that has to be done first thing in the morning before you get out of bed. It's another conversation there. But checking mucus, do it at the end of the day. and notice what you notice throughout the day.
Yeah, what happens? Yeah. Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you. I love it. So do you want to take us through the ritual?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So one thing that I often, when people ask me like, what is the best way to chart my cycle? I always say the best method is the one that you're actually going to do, and the one that you can do the most consistently, because we do change not only from phase to phase and week to week, but actually from day to day, hour to hour. You know, our hormones shifting all of the time. And I've noticed something that I call cycle amnesia, which is that it can be quite difficult to remember how you felt a few days ago, let alone a week ago. And so retrospective charting doesn't really work so well. I do actually think the best gold is found when we can be consistent with our practice and try and do it every day. And again, that doesn't have to take very long. What I'll lead you through now, you might be able to do every day and have space for, but also maybe not as well. Maybe it literally is just a check-in like you described earlier, like how do I feel, a couple of words, and that's enough. I go through phases with my cycle charting where sometimes it is very like, great, I'm on cycle day 14, how am I feeling? Brilliant, move on with my day. Whereas other times, if there's something that I am very curious about and want to investigate and journey with through a cycle, then I will dedicate more time to journaling, really sitting how I'm feeling. So there's no right or wrong. I always encourage people to be as consistent as possible and to do whatever that is going to like support them.
And then personally, what do you do it in a circle and you know, write in parts of the circle, or do you have like a diary that's dedicated to it and you do day by day, or like how do you have like an overview bit which is like the sort of like the top lines and then sort of like details later, like how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a combination, and they also fluctuate. So I do use my app all of the time to keep track of when I'm bleeding.
Which app do you use?
I'm
trying to get a clue.
I use me too, to just keep like the archive of all of my cycles. I use Kindara for my fertility charting, and chart my cervical mucus in there every day. And then I have what I call a menstrual map, and I use that as more of like a kind of overview of what's happening, and that is more of that circle approach. I don't do that every single day, again, unless I'm like really diving into something, but I use that as a place to kind of keep notes that I notice that feels significant. And then my absolute favorite, to be honest, is journaling. So I'm an avid journaler anyway. It just makes sense for me to incorporate my cycle journaling, my cycle charting practice into my journaling. So that might sound like a lot, but it all feeds itself and weaves in together. And I do suggest finding a practice that does make sense for you. So if you're someone who you know that you love pen to paper, use pen to paper. And if you're someone who knows that like the notes app on your phone, you're always using that to keep track of things, use the notes app on your phone. I love journaling anyway, so it makes sense for me to incorporate some of my observations into my journaling practice, and I can easily click back and see those. So playing with different ideas and experimenting is fun, and just because it works for somebody else doesn't mean it will work for you, and that's okay. Finding the method that suits you is most important.
Beautiful, thank you. I love it. Okay.
Cool. Shall we?
Ready.
Ready. Excellent. All right, well, what I'm going to do is invite everybody to close down their eyes. We've been talking quite a bit, so just noticing how that's felt, taking in new information, and just inviting your mind to relax and just let go of what we've been discussing here. And we'll just take a few breaths to come into the body and settle into this present moment together. So inhaling through your nose, Hold the breath at the top for a moment before slowly exhaling. And again, nice big inhalation through the nose. And letting it go. And once more on your own. And just allowing your breath to come to a regular breathing rhythm. And just keeping your focus on the soft rise and fall of your chest. Noticing what's happening in your heart space right now, how you're feeling there. And just breathing into whatever arises. If it helps to place a hand over your heart, you can do that. Maybe a hand over your lower belly, over your womb. We're going to invite the wisdom of your body to come through here as we check in with each of these 4 bodies that we've covered. So we'll begin with the physical body. I invite you to be curious about your energy levels today, being honest with yourself about how you slept last night, hunger, feelings of strength or resilience in the body, any tension. And just scanning from your toes and feet, up through your ankles, calves, knees, thighs, pussy and womb, up through your core and breasts and back, neck, up through your head and eyes and face and lips and hair, and just noticing what's happening in your physical body. We'll then move on to your mental body. So this includes your thoughts, mental health today, anything you've noticed about perhaps any inner critic, or noticing motivation or memory or cognition today, focus, what's happening for you mentally. Does your mind feel busy, clear, calm, fluctuating? What's happening mentally for you? As you notice what's coming up for you in your mental body, taking a attitude, if possible, of non-judgment, just simply being curious. We'll then move on to the emotional body. And this includes feelings, emotions, what's happening in your heart space. Have you noticed any strong emotions today or subtle feelings arise? Has your emotional body felt quite stable and without much change throughout the day, or have there been more ups and downs fluctuating between moods and feelings? And once again, just breathing into that, just noticing, being curious. We'll then move on to the spiritual body. How connected do you feel today to yourself, to life, to what brings you alive. How easy is it for you today to access your spiritual world, your inner world, your connection to source, whatever it means for you? How drawn do you feel to ritual and to spiritual practice? And perhaps what does that look like for you as well today? There might be another aspect of yourself that you'd like to explore here as well. Perhaps your creative energy today, or sexual energy, how you felt relating to other people. These aspects can all be brought in here too. So just taking a moment here to notice if there's another dimension of yourself that you would like to name and to recognize, to document in this particular day of your cycle. And just noticing if there's anything else that feels really alive for you, important to honor today. Well, the next step now is to stay within this introspective bubble that we've created, but to slowly open your eyes to find your map or your app or your notes app or piece of paper or journal, and to jot down what day of your cycle you're on today, and to make note of the observations that you've just made under these headings of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and any other aspects, dimensions that you'd like to recognize today. So when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes, staying in that space of reflection and connection to yourself, and make your cycle mapping observations.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. It's amazing how these different parts of you speak in different ways, and the bits of information that comes forward. Yeah, I just realized I'm actually really tired.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I really fancy a nap now.
That like coming in, you know, just taking a few breaths to come in, it does help to unveil some of the outside armor we might have put on in order to face the world. And to show up how we've needed to. And when we just drop into the body and back for a moment, that's where I find the truest observation emerge. And that might be, oh God, I actually feel really tired. Or it might be, oh, there's something else that I just hadn't recognized today because I had other responsibilities and commitments that I've needed to be a certain way for. And that's perfectly okay, because we do not live in a world that allows our cyclical natures to really shine through. So just doing a few deep breaths and just coming into the body when we're able to does allow some of that truth to come to the surface.
Beautiful. I love it. And I'd love you also just to talk a little bit about your cycle coaching school as well, for those women that really feel drawn to this work and that would love to learn more. Like, could you just give us an overview of what you offer and what someone would leave with as well?
Of course, yeah. So I, when did we begin? 2019, early 2020, I created Cycle Coach School, which trains women to be able to integrate menstrual cycle awareness into their practice and to become cycle coaches. I noticed that there's just a huge need across wellbeing industry, but also creatively. Anyone who's working one-on-one or in groups with women, I just really feel like they need to have an understanding of menstrual cycle awareness and to be able to share, and to approach clients perhaps differently to how they would, with somebody who doesn't have a menstrual cycle. I teach, we train people as coaches because that's my industry is coaching, and that's what I know. So we work through the lens of coaching and how do we coach people to connect to their menstruality and to have a grounded, solid cycle charting practice, to be able to teach others how to chart and how to really connect in using different frameworks and practices, to be able to share with their clients and with their community. So it's a certification program. So people leave once they've completed the assessment and submission, to be certified as a menstrual cycle coach. And it's just a really beautiful community of peers who really support each other and advocate for each other's work. And it's just grown year upon year, and it's been a real honor to train people to be able to share such important work with their communities.
Beautiful. Wow, that sounds amazing. And how long is the training for?
It's 6 months, from the beginning of the lessons until the end. The assessment process takes longer than that again, because it's a requirement that people have practice clients and that they do a peer supervision. And so there is a practicum element that takes a little bit longer. So I would say from the very beginning to the end is like somewhere between 9 and 12 months for most people. But the core training is 6 months of us being in community together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds so good. I love it. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Claire. I really just feel like every single conversation I learned so much more as well. And I love like all of these different flavors and all of these different ways that everybody works with their cycle as well. And so what you've shared today is just so valuable. It's like really feels like foundational work that every woman that is working with their cycle needs to know and it's something that each one of us can do. That said, I'll be honest, I am really terrible at journaling. I'm the worst journaler. So for me it's like I have to find like ways to be able to work it in my system too. So it's
that's the most important piece is being honest with yourself about what you will and will not do, and being okay with that, and doing it your way. And I think the other thing to remember is, like I said earlier, our cycles change all the time as well. That foundational piece is really important, no matter if you're brand new to menstrual cycle awareness, you've been charting your cycle for 10, 20 years, like coming back to that present observation of what is actually happening now is so crucial. That beginner's mind, it really
I love that. Oh, amazing. Yay, thanks for coming. Thank you everyone for joining us too.